There is a woman standing at the entrance to a throne room. She is dressed in her finest robes. Her hair is done. From the outside, she looks composed, the way people look composed when they have decided to stop letting their face tell the truth about what is happening inside them. She has not been summoned. No one sent for her. She came on her own, which in the Persian Empire of 480 BC means she came knowing she might not leave. The law is clear. You do not approach the king without an invitation. Not a servant, not a nobleman, not even the queen. The penalty for doing so is death, unless the king raises his golden scepter toward you. If he raises it, you live. If he does not, the guards are already there. She is standing at that door right now. She does not know what he will do. And what I want you to understand, before we go any further into her story, is that she stood there anyway. Her name is Esther. And before this is over, you are going to recognize her. Stay with me. Before we go any further, there is one thing about this book I need you to know. The book of Esther is the only book in the entire Bible where God and Apos' name does not appear. Not once. No mention of the Lord. No prayer recorded. No vision. No prophecy. No angel showing up with a message. In a library of 66 books, this one stands alone in its silence. Hold that. We will come back to it. The story takes place in Susa, the winter capital of the Persian Empire, in what is now modern-day Iran. The year is approximately 480 BC. The empire stretching around you is the largest the ancient world has ever seen. It runs from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, tens of millions of people under one king. That king is Xerxes, known to history as Xerxes I. And if you have read anything about Xerxes outside the Bible, you already know he is not a man who takes disappointment quietly. Herodotus, the Greek historian who documented his reign, describes a king of enormous power and almost no restraint. A man who once ordered the sea whipped with chains because a storm destroyed his bridge. A man surrounded by advisors whose primary qualification was the ability to tell him what he wanted to hear. This is the man Esther must face. But before Esther, there was Vashti. Vashti was queen before Esther. Beautiful, dignified, and gone, exiled in chapter 1 for a single act of refusal. The king threw a banquet. He called for Vashti to appear before his guests. She said no. And just like that, she was removed, erased from the court. The advisors told the king he had no choice. If the queen could refuse and face no consequences, women across the empire might get ideas. So Vashti disappeared. A new queen would be chosen. Here in Apos, that's what most people miss. Esther did not walk into an empty role. She walked into the story of a woman who had been erased, into a palace that had already shown her exactly what happened to queens who stepped out of line. Every corridor Esther walked, every meal she ate in that palace, she carried the knowledge of what this place had already done to the woman before her. That is the world Esther lived in. And somehow, out of this world, in this empire, under this king, she becomes the person who saves an entire people from annihilation. How does an orphan girl with a secret end up being the one person standing between a genocide and the grave? That is what we are here to find out. Her name, her real name, is Hadassah, not Esther. That comes later, for the Persian court, for the palace, for the world she must learn to survive in. But the name she was given at birth, the name Mordecai called her when she was small, the name that belonged to who she actually was, that name is Hadassah. In Hebrew, it means myrtle tree. Now the myrtle is not the cedar. It is not the oak, not the palm, not the towering trees that appear throughout Scripture as symbols of strength and permanence. The myrtle is a small shrub, fragrant, modest in size. You would walk past it on the road and not notice it, until it bloomed. And it has one quality that the more impressive trees do not. It blooms in dry ground. It survives in places where other things cannot. It does not need ideal conditions to become what it was made to be. This is who Esther was before she was a queen. She was an orphan. Both parents dead. The text does not tell us how or when, only that they were gone. She was raised by her older cousin Mordecai, a Jewish man living in Susa, sitting at the king and Apos' gate, which means he had minor official standing, enough to be present in the outer court, not enough to hold any real power. He was a man doing what he could in a country that was not his own. And he raised this girl, this Hadassah, as his own daughter. She grows up carrying two worlds inside her. She is Jewish, Benjaminite, from the same tribe as King Saul, with a heritage, a history, a god. And she is living inside a Persian empire that has no interest in any of those things. She learns early how to hold both. She learns early that survival sometimes requires knowing which name to use and when. She has two names: Hadassah for who she is, Esther for the world she must face. If you have ever walked into a room and quietly become a slightly different version of yourself, if you have ever adjusted your voice, your words, your whole presentation to fit a space that was not built for you, you already understand something about Esther that most Bible studies never mention. But here is what the text actually says. When Esther enters the harem for the 12 months of preparation required of every candidate, the word the text uses to describe how she conducted herself is not beautiful, though beauty is mentioned. It is something closer to wisdom, the same quality of discernment used to describe Daniel in Babylon, a young person navigating an impossible system with intelligence, with patience, with an instinct for reading what a room requires and responding accordingly. She has been called beautiful for 2,000 years. The text calls her wise first. She wins the favor of Haggai, the man in charge of the harem, immediately. He gives her the best rooms, extra portions, 7 attendants. This is not random. Haggai has seen hundreds of women come through. He recognizes something in Esther, not just her face, but her quality, the way she moves through difficulty without announcing it. And every single day, through all 12 months of preparation, through the day she is brought to the king, through the years she lives as queen, every single day she keeps the secret. She does not tell anyone she is Jewish. Mordecai instructed her not to, and she obeys. Not out of passivity, out of discernment. She understands the world she is in. She becomes queen of the most powerful empire on earth. The crown is placed on her head. The king loves her more than any other woman they brought to him. And she is still carrying the thing that could destroy her. Some women know exactly what this feels like, to be standing in your highest moment, your most visible season, your most public role, while something true about you remains carefully, quietly hidden, waiting for the moment it becomes safe to be fully known. For Esther, that moment is coming. She does not know yet what it will cost her. In the 3rd year of Xerxes and Apos' reign, a man named Haman is promoted. He is given a seat above every other official in the empire. The king commands that everyone at the gate bow down to him. Everyone does. Everyone except one man, Mordecai. Day after day, the others bow. Day after day, Mordecai remains standing. We are not told exactly why. The text simply says he would not bow. He is Jewish. And Haman is an Agagite, a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites, the ancient sworn enemy of Israel. This is not a personality conflict. This is a generational wound wearing a new title. Mordecai recognizes something in Haman that the Persian court does not see, and he will not bow to it. Haman finds out, and rather than punish Mordecai alone, he decides the entire Jewish people must be destroyed. He goes to the king. He does not name the Jews directly. He tells Xerxes there is a certain people scattered throughout the empire whose customs are different, whose laws they do not keep, and who are not worth keeping. He offers to pay for the operation himself, 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury. The king waves his hand. Keep your money. Do what you want with them. And he gives Haman his signet ring. With that ring, Haman drafts the decree, sent to every province, in every language. On the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jewish man, woman, and child in the Persian Empire is to be destroyed, killed, annihilated, their possessions taken. A date has been chosen. A method has been determined. The decree goes out, and the city of Susa is thrown into confusion. Mordecai tears his clothes. He puts on sackcloth and ashes and goes into the city, crying out, a loud and bitter cry. He sits at the king and Apos' gate, which he cannot enter in sackcloth. He is outside. He cannot get in. He cannot reach the king. He cannot stop what has already been set in motion. But he knows someone who can. Esther and Apos' servants come to her and tell her Mordecai is outside in sackcloth. She is troubled. She sends him new clothes, perhaps to cover him, perhaps because sackcloth at the king and Apos' gate draws attention she is not ready for. He refuses them. She sends a trusted attendant, a man named Hathach, to find out what is happening. Mordecai sends back the full text of Haman and Apos' decree. He tells Hathach everything. And he sends a command, go to the king. Intercede. Beg for your people. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because Esther and Apos, S first response is not yes. Her first response is an explanation of why she cannot go. She sends word back to Mordecai. Everyone in the empire knows the law. Anyone who enters the inner court without being called is to be put to death. The law makes no exception, not even for the queen. And the king has not called for her in 30 days. Read that again slowly. 30 days of silence from Xerxes. She does not know if she still has his favor. She does not know what mood he is in or what he has been told, or whether the man who exiled Vashti for a single act of independence would do the same, or worse, to her. She didn't and Apos. T used these words, of course. But what Esther was feeling in that moment is something that does not require translation. She knew exactly what she was supposed to do. She also knew exactly what it might cost her. The situation is ancient. That feeling is this morning. Mordecai receives her message, and he sends back an answer that has echoed across 3,000 years. He tells her, "Do not think that because you are in the king and Apos' house you alone of all the Jews will escape. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jewish people from another place. But you and your father and Apos' house will perish." And then, the question that undoes everything. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Notice what he does not say. He does not say you were born for this. He does not say God told me you are the one. He does not promise her that it will work, that she will survive, that the king will raise the scepter. He asks a question. He holds up a possibility and asks her to look at it. Who knows? 2 words. The most honest, most haunting, most clarifying 2 words in the entire book. Not a command. Not a prophecy. A question about identity. About whether she believes her life has meaning beyond her own survival. About whether she is willing to find out. She is about to answer. She sends her answer back to Mordecai. 1 message. Go. Gather all the Jews in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as we do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. That last line. Sit with it for a moment. The word translated perish in that sentence. In the original Hebrew, it is the word avid. To be destroyed. To be annihilated. It is the exact same word used in Haman and Apos' decree. The legal document written to end her people uses avid. And now Esther picks up that word, the word written for her destruction, and speaks it back calmly, deliberately, as an act of surrender. She does not say, "I will go and everything will be fine." She does not say, "I have prayed and God told me it will work." She says, "I will go, and if the worst thing happens, it happens." She takes the word meant to undo her and turns it into an offering. That is not resignation. That is one of the most courageous sentences ever spoken by anyone in Scripture. Pay attention to this. What follows is 3 days of silence. The text tells us almost nothing about what happened in those 3 days. No vision appears to Esther. No angel arrives with a message. No still small voice comes in the night. We are simply told that the Jews in Susa gathered and fasted. That Esther and her young women fasted. 3 days. No food. No water. Nothing from heaven that the text records. Just a woman, and her people, in the dark. And I think this is the part of Esther and Apos' story that the modern church moves past far too quickly, because we are uncomfortable with it. We want the burning bush. We want the voice from the cloud. We want the moment where God shows up and makes the path clear and the fear manageable and the outcome certain before we are asked to take the step. Esther did not get that. She got 3 days of silence. 3 days of fasting in a room in a palace in a foreign empire while outside the walls a decree with her people and Apos' name on it was already circulating through 127 provinces. Think about the last time you knew exactly what you were supposed to do, and you spent 3 days not doing it. Not because you didn't and Apos' care. Not because you were lazy or faithless or weak. Because the cost was real, and the outcome was not guaranteed, and you were waiting for a sign, for a feeling, for something to shift inside you that would make the step feel less like stepping off a ledge. That is not weakness. That is Esther, chapter 4. The difference between you and her is not that she was fearless. It is that on the 3rd day, she got dressed anyway. The text says it plainly. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. Not her fasting clothes. Not sackcloth. Her royal robes. She did the thing that the moment called for. She dressed for where she was going, not for how she was feeling. She put on the crown before the fear was gone. She prepared herself for the outcome she was walking toward rather than the outcome she was afraid of. She did not wait until she felt ready. She got dressed first. Then she walked. And here is what I want you to hold as she walks toward that throne room. God and Apos. Esther's name is not in this book. There is no record of him speaking to Esther in those 3 days. No confirmation comes from heaven. No door swings open. No sign appears. And yet, he was holding the outcome on the other side of the door she had not yet opened. In a book where his name is never spoken, where prayer is never recorded, where no miracle interrupts the political machinery of the most powerful empire on earth, he was never more present. Not in a vision, in the fast, in the 3 days, in the young women who fasted alongside her, in the cousin who refused to let her stay silent, in the specific positioning of an orphan girl from the tribe of Benjamin inside the palace of the king she was about to walk toward uninvited. He was hidden inside the story the whole time, the way he is hidden inside yours. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes. That sentence deserves more than we give it. We read it and move immediately to what happens next, the throne room, the scepter, the king and Apos. Esther's response. But stay here for just a moment. On the 3rd day, after 72 hours of no food, no water, no word from heaven, after 3 days of sitting with the full weight of what she was about to do, after all of that, she gets up, she gets dressed. She puts on the robes of the position she was given, not the position she felt like she deserved that morning. And she walks. She enters the inner court of the king and Apos' palace and stands where the king can see her from his throne. The text is specific about this. She does not burst through the doors. She does not announce herself. She stands in the court, visible, waiting, fully exposed. The king is on his throne in his royal robes, and she is standing there, uninvited, in hers, and everything, her life, her people, the entire outcome of this story, comes down to what he does in the next breath. He looks up, he sees her, and he holds out the golden scepter. 3 words in the Hebrew that decide everything. He held it out toward her. She is not put to death. She is welcomed. She crosses the room and touches the tip of the scepter, the ancient gesture of acceptance, and the king asks her, "What do you want, Queen Esther?" "Whatever it is, up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." She has him. This is the moment. For years of navigating this palace, 30 days of silence, 3 days of fasting, and now the most powerful man in the world is sitting in front of her asking what she needs. And she invites him to dinner. This is the moment everything changes, not because of what she asks, but because of what she does not ask yet. Every commentary I have read calls Esther and Apos' delay at this point passive, hesitant. Some scholars suggest she lost her nerve. Almost no one calls it what it actually was, tactical. Esther had lived inside this palace for 4 years. She had studied this king the way you study someone when your survival depends on understanding them. She knew his patterns. She knew his moods. She knew that Xerxes, impulsive and easily swayed, needed to be handled with precision, not urgency. She was not afraid to ask. She was choosing the exact right moment to make absolutely certain he would say yes. So she invites him to a banquet. He comes. He asks again, "What do you want?" She invites him to a second banquet. He comes again. He asks a 3rd time, with Haman sitting right there beside him. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" "It will be given to you." And now she speaks. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated." In that sentence, Esther gives up the last protection she had, her hidden identity, the secret she has been carrying since the day she walked into this palace, the thing she was told never to reveal. She names herself. She names her people. She says the word, "We have been sold," and in doing so she becomes fully known, fully exposed, in front of the king who exiled the last queen who stepped out of line. She does it anyway. Haman is undone. The king and Apos' rage is immediate. And then Esther does something that is almost never taught. She keeps going. Because the decree cannot be unmade. Under Persian law, a decree sealed with the king and Apos' ring cannot be revoked. Not even by the king himself. So Esther comes back. She asks for a second decree, one that gives the Jewish people the right to defend themselves. She saves her people once with her presence. She saves them a second time with her persistence. Remember what I told you at the very beginning of this video, that God and Apos' name never appears in this book? Here is what I believe that means. God was not absent from Esther and Apos' story. He was hidden inside it, the way he is hidden inside yours. Not in the miracle you are waiting for, in the cousin who showed up, in the 3 days you spent fasting and hearing nothing back, in the moment you finally walked through the door, shaking, and the scepter came down anyway. And here is what I want to leave you with. 3 things. The first, God does not wait for you to be fearless before he moves. He moves through the fear, not after it disappears. Esther was not fearless when she walked into that throne room. She was obedient. Those are not the same thing, and the difference matters more than we say. The second, you are allowed to take 3 days. The delay is not disobedience. Sometimes the fast comes before the step. Sometimes you have to get quiet. Really quiet. No food, no distraction, no noise, before you can hear clearly enough to get dressed and walk. The waiting is not the opposite of faith. Sometimes it is the deepest expression of it. The third, and this is the one I want you to carry with you. Esther did not save her people because she was extraordinary. She saved them because she stopped waiting to feel extraordinary. She put on the robes. She walked to the door. She said, "If I perish, I perish." And the thing she feared most, being fully known, fully seen, identity exposed, turned out to be the very thing that set them free. Not just her. Every person standing behind her. Whatever you are hiding, your identity, your fear, your need, your story, the moment you name it out loud, fully, in the room that frightens you most, may be the moment that changes everything. Not just for you. For everyone who has been waiting behind you for someone to go first. What is the door you have been standing outside of? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. We started with a woman standing at a door. You know who she is now. You know what she carried to get there, the dead parents, the hidden name, the secret she kept for 4 years inside a palace that had already shown her what it did to women who stepped out of line. You know about the 30 days of silence and the 3 days of fasting, and the moment she stood in the inner court in her royal robes with everything exposed, and waited to find out if she would live or die. She was not the most powerful person in that story. She was not the most educated, the most connected, the most politically positioned. She was an orphan from a minority people living inside an empire that had signed a decree for her destruction. By every measurement the world uses, she was the wrong person for this moment. And yet, she is the one the story remembers. Not Xerxes with his ring and his throne. Not Haman with his decree and his gallows. Not even Mordecai, whose wisdom set everything in motion. The book carries her name. It always has. Because she was not chosen because she was fearless. She was not chosen because she had it all together, or because she had processed her grief, or because she had resolved every question about her identity before she was asked to act on it. She was chosen, positioned, placed, brought to this kingdom, while she was still in the middle of all of it. Still hiding. Still uncertain. Still one sleepless night away from sending Mordecai another message explaining why she could not go. She went anyway. She put on her robes. She walked to the door. She stood in the court and let herself be seen. And when the king finally asked her, really asked her, for the 3rd time, with nowhere left to hide, she told him the truth about who she was. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the thing that changed everything. Hadassah, a myrtle tree, small, fragrant, blooms in dry ground. She was exactly the right person. She just had to stop waiting until she felt like it.